If you're ever thinking of going to a fast food restaurant after midnight, please don't. Because let me walk you through what happened last time I did that. It's 1 a.m. and I'm starving. The city's asleep, but my stomach isn't. So I decided I needed to find somewhere to eat. The only problem is, every food place near me is closed at this time. So there I was, driving around in the dark with my stomach making these weird whale noises as if it was trying to communicate with other hungry stomachs in the area. Originally, my plan was to pull up to this taco place I knew of where none of the workers there spoke English, so I knew the food would always be good. Because their hours are super random and sometimes they're open super late, but when I got to it, they were closed. But after driving for a little bit, the only thing that was open was the gas station that offers hot dogs that have been rotating in that heater thing since 2004. But anyways, my standards were dropping fast, but not that fast. But then I spotted something. The golden arches glowing in the distance. But better yet, there were a bunch of cars in the parking lot, so I knew they were open. McDonald's wasn't my first choice because their fries get soggy kind of quickly and their ice cream machine has been broken since World War I. But at 1 a.m., the only requirement I had for the place I went to was that they had something I could put in my mouth. Wait, pause. So I pull into the parking lot, but immediately, something was off when I got into the drive-thru. Because I get to the screen with the menu, waiting for them to say hello to me and ask what I want to order. But after about 10 seconds of waiting, nothing was said. So doing something I'm usually too scared to do, I tried initiating a conversation for once. I said, "Hello? Is anyone there?" But after another couple seconds, it was still silent. But then, I heard something weird. Music playing in the distance. But after locking in on what the sound was, I realized it was coming from inside the McDonald's. But it wasn't their typical Kids Bop elevator music playlist that they usually play in there or whatever it is. But instead, it almost sounded like a party. But to make things even more weird, I finally heard a sound come from the intercom at the drive-thru. And everyone knows, the drive-thru speakers usually sound terrible. But this one wasn't just terrible, it was downright suspicious because there was a static noise coming from it. But the problem? It was what I could hear behind the static that made my midnight food run feel like I just stumbled onto something I wasn't supposed to. But because there was noise coming from the intercom now, I figured they were listening to what I was gonna say and just wanted me to say my order. So I cleared my throat, making sure I didn't voice crack when I tried to speak. But as I'm about to tell them my order, I say, "Hi, can I get a..." And then I hear a bzzz sound. This weird static noise cut me off mid-sentence. It wasn't regular static though. It was the kind that sounds like when an alien is trying to communicate with humans through the radio. Like if you focus really closely, it almost sounded like you could hear voices. I knew people must have been inside since there were so many cars out there, but I didn't know what was going on. So I was just like, well, maybe they can't hear me. Let's try yelling. So I went, "Hello? Can I order?" But once again, more static. But this time, I noticed something underneath all that noise. People talking. A lot of people. It sounded like a full-on conversation happening, and I could hear the music in the background. It was faint, but unmistakable. So I'm starting to think they accidentally left their mic on for the intercom while they went to do something else. So I tried again. This time with the polite approach, thinking that maybe they just didn't like my approach last time and thought I was mean. So I go, "Excuse me, is anyone there?" Once again, nothing. Just static and more of those weird background noises. Okay, well, let's try one more time then. So now, I did the Karen approach. By the way, sorry to all the Karens out there who are cool. I kind of feel bad for you guys. I really hope my name never becomes a meme like that. If the name Tyler ever becomes the male version of Karen, I'm changing my name to LeBron. But anyways, I went with the Karen approach. So I said, "Hello? Hello, can anyone hear me? I'm trying to order food. Can I talk to a manager?" Still, nothing but static and whatever the heck those background noises were. After running out of ideas of what to do next, then I heard another weird noise, clapping through the speaker. Along with that, I could faintly hear people counting in the background. "Uno, dos, tres." Now, me no hablo español, but I'm pretty sure that was Spanish. Shout out to my 3 years of Spanish class I took in high school to learn that phrase. That's about all I learned. Actually, that's not true. I also know Feliz Navidad because of all the songs about it. Yeah, that one means happy birthday. So after hearing all these noises, I realized that I needed to go inside if I wanted to get my order. I didn't know what was going on in there, but there were so many cars that I figured if I wanted to get my food, I could easily do it if I walked inside. This was the last thing I wanted to do because it was freezing cold at 1 a.m., but whatever. So I had two goals. One, figure out what the heck was going on inside there. And two, get my dang Big Mac. I'll pull all the way around the drive-thru and park my car. And that was when I looked inside the building for the first time. And what do I see? At least 15 to 20 people dancing inside the McDonald's. But not only that, they were dressed up in fancy clothes. I sat there for a second questioning whether I was just seeing things because I was so hungry or if this was actually real. But after having a talk with the whale in my stomach, I knew I wasn't hallucinating. Now, I've never been to a McDonald's this late at night, so I didn't know if it was just normal for it to turn into a nightclub after midnight or what the deal was. But I needed to find out. My hunger was still screaming at me, but now my curiosity was screaming even louder. You know what my first thought was of what was going on in there? A restaurant makeover show, where they get one of those really old, rundown restaurants and turn it into the most amazing place to eat ever. You know what I'm talking about? The Gordon Ramsay shows where you just roast the people that work there?
I don't think you can actually cook.
So I don't think that was happening. I walked around the building before going in to see if I could get any more hints of what was going on in there. And when I get to the back of the building, that's when I see another layer of strangeness. Delivery trucks were parked outside. But I know people who worked at McDonald's before, and they always talked about deliveries happening in the morning, not the middle of the night. So I completely forgot about the fact that I was even hungry now. My stomach even stopped growling now because apparently being nosy outweighs the desire for food. So I tried to get a closer look through the front windows to see what was going on in there, because they're kind of tinted, so unless you're right up next to them, you can't really see inside. And once I put my face up to the glass, I can see more details about what's happening. But right as I'm looking around, someone in there makes eye contact with me. The person that saw me kind of jumped at first when we looked at each other, which I don't blame them for, because I may or may not have been standing at the window looking at them like this. But they startled me just as much as I startled them, because it felt like I wasn't supposed to be watching whatever was going on in there. You know how when you try to act normal, but it just makes you look super suspicious? That was me after we made eye contact. I tried to look away as quickly as possible and do that casual walk thing where you have your hands in your pocket and you're whistling, just looking around as if you're not guilty. But if anything, that just made me look more suspicious, because they were still looking at me. So I just went back to my car. I sat there for a couple minutes thinking if I should try going inside again or if I should just go back home. But I was too curious and too hungry to leave. So I snuck back up to the window to see what was going on again. But this time, I made sure to be more discreet. And after looking around inside for a while, I started to notice some things. A bunch of balloons hanging from the ceiling. Streamers crisscrossed against the menu board. But the weirdest thing of all, a photo of a random girl stood up on a canvas in the middle of the place. I had to look up and make sure this place was still a McDonald's and it hadn't been turned into a convention center since the last time I was there. I'm not usually a guy that stays up super late, so I wasn't sure if this was just something that always happens at this time. Eventually, I just said I'm gonna go for it and try going inside to see what was happening in there. I tried looking confident this time walking up to the door instead of taking that stalker approach I took the last time. I once saw someone say that if you act like you belong somewhere, no one will bat an eye. Unfortunately, whoever said that is a liar though, because I once went into a Holiday Inn trying to get a free continental breakfast because they slapped so much, and I walked inside there with my chest out looking like I owned the place. Then I went into the kitchen and started making myself a waffle, but I got kicked out right away by an employee asking to see my room card. So I went straight up to that door and reached on the handle, expecting it to at least open, but unfortunately, it didn't budge. I tried again, thinking that it might just be stuck, but nothing, which made zero sense considering there were dozens of people inside looking like they were having the time of their life. None of the people in there heard me doing this because of the loud music that was playing, so they didn't come to the door. But after giving it one more big tug trying to open it, I once again smushed my face on the glass, staring through it to see what they were all doing. And that's when something happened. The most awkward moment of the entire month. Maybe even the entire year. A guy standing near the entrance turned around and caught me with my face smushed against the glass as if I was trying to make love to the window. Unfortunately, that's about as close as I have gotten to making love, so I'll take it. But we locked eyes for a couple seconds. Me with my, I promise I'm not trying to impregnate this window right now, look on my face. And him with his, who is this person trying to break in right now, expression on his face. My face turned red with embarrassment. After locking eyes with me, he didn't even say anything. He just looked me dead in the eyes and shook his head slowly as if he was saying, no, you cannot come in. It felt like I was getting turned away from a VIP event. Like, nah, sorry bro, the Filet-O-Fish party is invite only. Joke's on you. I didn't want to party at McDonald's anyway. I'm going to Wendy's where she knows how to throw a real party. No, I didn't say that. But anyways, back to reality. I stood frozen, considering what to say next. Should I mouth something like, open the door, through the glass? Hold up my wallet saying that I want to pay for food? Just accept defeat? My stomach growled loudly enough that he probably heard it through the door. And the entire time this was going on, the gathering continued behind him. People laughing and dancing, completely unaware of the hungry guy just standing at the door. I felt like I was watching whatever was going on in there through a TV screen. So I decided, regardless of whatever was happening inside there, they weren't going to let me in. And I accepted defeat. I realized I was just gonna have to go home and settle for eating cinnamon on ice once again. Just as I was walking back to my car, feeling totally defeated, I then hear a voice. Hey! I quickly turn around and see that the man playing defense on that front door like Prime Maldini was talking to me. So I respond with, yes? And he waves toward me, signaling to walk back towards him so we can talk. Then he says to me, were you trying to get food? And I say, yeah, at first I was, but then I was trying to figure out what was going on in there after seeing everything happening. Then he gives me the big reveal. The owner of this restaurant has a daughter, and it was her birthday that day. So they were throwing a birthday party for her in the McDonald's. Then my heart dropped. Oh my gosh. Ronald McDonald has a daughter? Nah, but for real. I was wondering, who throws a birthday party at 1 a.m. in a McDonald's? Everything suddenly made more sense though, from the fancy clothes to the decorations. Then I asked the guy if there was a chance those fryers were still running. And he goes, nah, I'm sorry, you won't be able to get any McDonald's food tonight, but I can give you a cookie. So I gladly took one, went back home, and went to bed. I don't know if this is a common thing to happen at fast food restaurants past midnight. If you're a night owl and you're aware of this happening, please let me know. But from now on, I'm not testing it anymore. Picture this. It's 1 a.m. and you're about to stop working your shift as a food delivery driver when suddenly you get an order for one thing, a medium Coke. You think, that's a little odd, but you accept the order anyway. But when you arrive to the delivery address, you see a massive house with no lights on. So you text the customer saying, I'm here, and they reply with,
doors unlocked, come upstairs.
Because this is an experience I went through, and what happened next made me quit that job forever. Let me explain. So when I was in high school, I used to be a Postmates delivery driver. I wanted to have a job, but I also wanted the freedom to only work when I felt like it. So this seemed like the perfect thing for me. And at first, it was. I genuinely enjoyed doing it until one particular night. Because there would be times where I would get a weird order, or the location I was supposed to deliver it to was a little sketchy, but nothing like this. This night was different because there I was at almost 1 a.m. with my eyes barely staying open after working 6 hours on a Postmates shift. And you might be asking, Tyler, why are you working that late? Well, I had a goal of making a certain amount of money that day, and I was super close to it. So I was just gonna keep going until I finally got to it. But I got so tired that I was just about to forget about that goal and hit log off on the app when suddenly I get an order. My phone buzzes, and usually I love that sound because that sound equals money. But this time it was different because after looking at this order, I wanted to throw my phone out the window. The person ordering only wanted one thing, a medium Coke. No food, just a drink. And at first I was annoyed. I was thinking, who orders just a drink this late at night? Like, why would you need a single Coke delivered at 1 a.m.? With all the fees and everything, a single Coke was gonna cost like 10 times what it normally would if you just went to the gas station and got one. So that was a little weird. But then I looked closer at the map and saw just how far their delivery location was. Which, if you've ever been a delivery driver, you want the destinations that are far because that means more money. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll do this one last delivery and it should get me to the goal I wanted to reach. The GPS took me down these winding roads, further and further from any city lights. And I'd never been to this part of town before, so I wasn't familiar with it at all. But as I'm driving, with each turn, the houses got fewer and fewer and it became more quiet. I had a weird feeling in my stomach about this delivery, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. I kept checking the GPS to make sure I was going the right direction, but after about 15 minutes of driving, it said that I arrived to the location. There was a huge iron gate that was rusted and creaking open, swaying around in the wind making sounds. So I stopped for a second, wondering if I should just leave the Coke at the gate and call it a night. But in this person's order, they specifically said to let them know when I got there and they would come out and get the drink. So I drove through the gate and up this super long driveway, but when my headlights shined on the house, I was shocked at what I saw. It was a massive old mansion just sitting there in the dark, except for one flickering porch light that kept flicking on and off as if it was sending some sort of signal. I parked my car at the bottom of these steps that led up to the front door and I turned off my engine, which made everything quiet. When my lights turned off, I noticed that there was no TV glow from windows, no kitchen lights, nothing inside that house that actually showed someone was inside there waiting for their drink. So I sat there for a minute, thinking about my choices. I could just drive away and say I wasn't able to find the place, but I'd already come this far, and canceling now meant no payment at all. And I needed that money, because this was back during prime Fortnite days, so you know I was saving up to buy those female Fortnite skins because they looked cooler. So I grabbed the drink, took a deep breath, and got out of my car. The house was so dark that I had to turn on my phone flashlight, which honestly didn't really help. The front yard was a mess. There was a bunch of overgrown grass that literally went up to my knees. Like I was waiting for a snake to come out and bite me. If a snake bit me, would you get the venom out? Okay, I don't know what I was doing. When I finally reached the front door, I took a second to catch my breath. Then I knocked on the door. Not too hard at first, because the silence around me was so heavy that any noise felt super loud. But after knocking, no answer. So I tried again. Knocking louder this time. Still, nothing but silence. Not even footsteps coming to the door or a voice calling out, "Just a minute," just silence. I stood there for a few seconds trying to decide what to do. Finally, I pulled out my phone and texted the customer through the app. "Hey, I'm outside with your order." The reply came back almost instantly, which was weird because it seemed like no one was home. My phone buzzed and I looked down to read a message that made me question this whole situation. It said, "Doors unlocked. Come upstairs." 4 words that sent chills down my spine. Or is it 5 words? No, is it 6? Door is unlocked. come up. Upstairs is one word. It's 5 words. I stood there for a solid minute, just staring at my phone. There was no way I was going inside this creepy house. I mean, I was doing Postmates for a couple months up to this point, and I was never asked to actually come inside the house. So I'm thinking to myself, this has to be a joke, right? But then I remembered how far I'd driven to get here, all the gas I wasted, and I knew the payment for completing this job was gonna be a lot, just based off the travel I had to do. And like I said, I needed those female Fortnite skins. Plus, if I cancel the order now, I might get a bad rating, which would mean fewer deliveries in the future. I tried calling the customer, thinking I could just maybe ask them to come to the front door, but the phone rang and went straight to voicemail. A generic automated voice told me to leave a message, so I hung up without saying anything. That made everything feel even weirder. Like whoever ordered the Coke didn't want to speak to me over the phone. I stood on their porch, wondering why someone would order just a medium Coke for delivery to a destination this far out. Was this some kind of prank? Or was this something much, much worse? Was someone watching me right now, laughing at the dumb delivery guy standing on their porch? Or was someone waiting inside, hoping I'd be stupid enough to enter a stranger's house alone? My brain kept screaming at me to leave, to just drop the drink and run, but something else, the Fortnite skins, made me reach for that doorknob. So I gripped the cold metal knob and turned it slowly. And just like they said in the text, the front door was open. No resistance. No locked door to save me from my bad decisions, just a door swinging in the darkness, inviting me in. So I stepped inside. The door creaked open, and I swear it sounded like those horror movies when I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was how massive the entryway was. It was almost completely dark inside, except for this weird orange glow coming from the end of the house. I stood there for a second, still holding that stupid medium Coke, wondering if I should just set it on the ground and leave, because the house looked like someone could have lived there, but they definitely weren't taking good care of it. So after not finding anyone, I shout out loud, "Hello? Postmates delivery." My voice bounced off the walls, coming right back to me, making the house feel even more empty than it was. Once again, I didn't get an answer back, just silence. But it was the silence that felt like someone was watching you. The air inside the house was freezing cold, way colder than outside, and it smelled musty. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I finally realized where that orange glow was coming from. It was a candle. Not an electric fake candle either, a real candle with a real flame, placed with one at the end of this huge hallway and another at the top of the staircase, which meant someone had to actually be here to light these candles. I took a few steps further in, with the floorboards creaking underneath my feet. I saw the staircase they mentioned and started walking. Each step made the house sound like it was gonna fall apart, getting worse and worse as I went higher. When I got to the top of the staircase, I said out loud again, but this time I was a little more quiet because I wasn't sure if I wanted an answer anymore. Still though, no response. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw another light coming from the end of the hallway inside a room, with the door slightly open so I could just see it. I figured that was where this person must have been. I recognized the carpet under my feet was super worn out in the middle, almost as if thousands of people have walked this same path many times. I stood at the top of the stairs for what felt like forever, just trying to convince myself to leave the drink and get out of there. But I'd come this far already. If something was gonna happen, I just accepted it. I was really wishing now that my parents put me in martial arts when I was younger, instead of a bunch of other sports that I sucked at anyway. When I reached the door at the end of the hallway, I just stood there, staring at it. My hand was shaking as I reached out to push it open. So I slowly tapped the door, opening it. But the room was completely empty, except for the candle lit up inside. The flames cast these weird dancing shadows on the walls that made it look like someone might have been in there, even though I was completely alone. Or at least, I thought I was. Because the windows were covered with what looked like old bed sheets, yellow and stained. They were nailed to the window frames, blocking my view of the outside. Was it maybe to keep people from seeing inside the house? Or was it maybe to keep people from inside the house to not be able to look out of it? I wasn't sure. So now I shouted to the point where anyone could hear me. "Hello, I have your drink!" But the silence that followed felt heavy, as if it was pushing against me. And that's when I heard it. A noise coming from outside. I knew someone or something was close by. And I didn't want to be stuck inside this creepy house anymore with no way out. So without thinking twice, I left the Coke upstairs in that room and ran out of there. I didn't care how much noise I made anymore. I bolted out of that room with my feet pounding against the old floorboards. I jumped the stairs 2 at a time, almost falling because I was trying to go so fast. And I burst out the front door like my life depended on it, which honestly, it may have. But when I opened that front door again, that's when I saw what was making the noise. Headlights cutting through the darkness at the bottom of the driveway. Another car was pulling up to the house. I froze, thinking, oh, this must be the person who ordered the drink. But I was also terrified, thinking of the other possibilities of who this could have been. Then they stopped their car and opened their door. A guy probably around my age stepped out, and he was holding something. a small cup. When he saw me standing there, he looked confused. Postmates delivery? He asked. I had no idea what was going on after he just said that. I thought this must have been a glitch in the Matrix. I ran over to him, probably looking like a complete maniac at first, and he looked scared of me, probably thinking that I was the one ordering that drink. So that's when I asked him, "You're a Postmates delivery driver too?" "Yeah." Then I told him, "So am I. But I got a delivery order for a drink here, and no one came to pick it up." Then he says, "Huh, that's weird. I just got an order to bring a medium Sprite to this address." Now I knew something fishy was happening. He pulled out his phone and showed me his screen. It was the same address as mine. Same customer name and order too. Just a weird request for a medium drink. No food at all. A couple of things weren't right about this situation. One, in all my times of working for Postmates, no one ever just ordered a drink by itself. And they especially wouldn't do it 2 separate times just to double their delivery fee. Not in this economy. I don't care how big your house is. Ain't no one gonna be able to afford that. Then I asked him, "Did they also tell you to go inside because they're waiting upstairs?" And he says, "Yeah, how did you know?" We stood there in the driveway, completely confused, just trying to make sense of what was happening. And that's when he pointed to something near the edge of the yard that I didn't notice earlier. "What's that over there?" So I looked at where he was pointing and saw a worn down sign in the tall grass. We both walked over to it, using our flashlights to see better. And that's when we saw a for sale sign, covered in cobwebs and dirt, as if it had been there for a while. Now things were starting to get freaky, and not the type of freaky that I like. Okay, that was just... I had no idea what was going on anymore. So trying to get some clarity on the situation, I searched the address of this house up online. The real estate listing popped up right away, and my stomach dropped as I read it, because the listing said that this house had been vacant for over 6 months. I told the other driver this and showed him my screen. This meant no one had been living here for over 150 days, which brought a bunch of questions, because someone had clearly been in that house super recently to set those candles. And they knew the front door was open, so whoever did this had to be close by, and they had to be listening to us. That's when it hit us both at the same time. Why would multiple delivery drivers be called to an empty house? Like, what's the incentive behind this? Someone or something was deliberately lurking delivery drivers to this address at the middle of the night. For what purpose? Well, it wasn't a good one, because after this realization, the driver left, not caring about the money he was giving up, and told me that I should do the same. He didn't need to tell me twice. We both jumped in our cars and got out of there. But I couldn't stop thinking about what the reasoning was for all of this. All I knew was that someone had gone through a lot of trouble just to get these delivery drivers to go to this abandoned mansion in the middle of the night. And I had a feeling I wasn't the first delivery driver to go through this, and the person that came after me wasn't going to be the last. So the next day, I made a really dumb decision, because I couldn't get this house out of my head trying to figure out the truth behind this whole scenario. So I decided to go on this forum online where delivery drivers share scary stories about creepy deliveries they had in the state I was in. So I searched up the name of the street from the order to see if anything popped up, and what do you know? I found multiple posts about that same house. Different drivers, different delivery apps, but the same pattern every time. They order just one drink with instructions to come inside, and when they get inside, there's a candle lit up. The exact same thing that I experienced. Apparently, this had been happening for months. All the stories they had sounded super similar, except for one. Because although in most of the posts, they would mention the candles and the weird house and the fact that no one ever actually came up to get the order, one delivery driver had a different experience. In their story, it started out the same, where they went inside and saw the candles and everything. But as they were going upstairs, they said they looked out the window, which must have not been covered at the time, and saw someone standing by their car. He said they made eye contact for a split second, and then that person ran away once he realized he was caught. He immediately went down to his car in an attempt to find this person, but by the time he got back, there was nothing. At first, he thought this person was trying to steal his car, and that was the whole reasoning behind these weird orders. But none of the drivers who posted about this house said that they ever got anything stolen from them. After learning about this creepy house, knowing that there could be more places like this out there, I quit Postmates that day. I was just too terrified to do it anymore, and I wanted to spend more time playing Fortnite. But mostly I was just too terrified, so I deleted the app completely. But here's the thing that still freaks me out. About a year ago, I randomly thought about this story for the first time in a while. So I decided to drive back by that house, but in the daytime, just to see if anything had changed. But when I arrived, what did I see? Nothing. The house was demolished. So I don't have the answers to what was really going on inside this house, and after it got demolished, I probably never will. But if there's one thing I know now, it's that I will stay unemployed forever. If you've ever thought about exploring an abandoned school, just know it is not safe. Because I made the biggest mistake of my life a couple months ago when some friends and I decided to explore an abandoned school on a road trip. But what started as just curiosity turned into one of the most terrifying nights of my life after we heard a noise that seemed innocent but would later prove to not be. So let's start from the beginning. What would you do if you saw a massive creepy building in the middle of nowhere during a road trip? Because that's exactly what me and my friends saw when we were driving from Los Angeles to Vegas. We were in the middle of a long road trip and bored out of our minds from how long the drive was when suddenly my friend who was driving slams on the brake and goes, "What is that?" So we all look to where he's pointing and see an absolute massive abandoned building in the middle of nowhere. So of course, it sparked our curiosity right away. Considering the fact that we still had a couple hours before getting to our destination, we thought this was a good place to stop and stretch our legs. So we all agreed we should go check it out. But we had no idea how much further we would go than just checking it out. Because at first, none of us knew what it was. We all had our guesses. One of my friends thought it was an old shopping mall. One of them thought it was an old abandoned government building. Because this place looked like a spirit Halloween when it's not October. There could have been a sign on the outside of it that said free candy inside, and I would have been like, yeah, that sounds about right. And my big back still would have fell for it too. So none of us had any idea what we were looking at. But the closer we got to it, the more intriguing it became. Because there were vines growing up the side of the building, making it look like it hasn't been touched in years. So all signs pointed to this place being abandoned. Spoiler alert, it was not. Because as we got out of the car to walk up to this place, we finally figured out what it was. Through one of the dirty windows, we could see rows of desks and a chalkboard. Oh my gosh. It's an abandoned school. And something about seeing a place like this where you know kids used to go to school inside there and now it being completely empty felt really off. And that feeling would only get stronger as time went on. By the way, if you see me sweating, it's because I filmed these videos in my closet and it's so hot today. But whatever, time to lock in again. So we spent about 10 minutes walking around the outside of the building, looking through each window. We could see empty classrooms with desks still arranged in a neat order. There was a hallway with lockers lining the walls, some of them still open. And then in what looked like a cafeteria, there were tables and chairs scattered all around. It was really strange because this place almost felt as if all the students just got up one day, left, and never came back. This was the first thing that didn't make sense, because why would a school just shut down without anything being done to it? And also, we were kind of in the middle of nowhere. So why would there be a school in this location at all? There were a lot of questions we had, but the answer to all these was not what we expected. Because the whole time we're walking around the outside, my gut is telling me that something's just off about this place. But all my friends wanted to go inside. And if there's one thing about me, if my friends are down to do something, I'm down to do it too. Like if you asked if I wanted to go skydiving into a volcano, I would say absolutely not. But the moment my friend goes, "Hey, we're going skydiving into a volcano tomorrow, want to come?" I'm there. I'm down for anything. So now that we decided we wanted to check out this place, it was time to find a way inside. And that was pretty easy, because as we were walking around, we noticed a place where a door was supposed to be was just completely missing. Kind of weird if you ask me, right? But at the time, I just rolled with it. When we first stepped inside, I remember thinking that this would just be a quick look around. We'd check out a few rooms, take some pictures thinking that we'd gain so much aura from them, when in reality, we just looked chopped, and then get back on the road. But unfortunately, I was wrong. It started out normal going inside. It was anything you would expect from an abandoned building. But you know that feeling when you realize you might have made a huge mistake? That's exactly what hit me about 15 minutes after we walked into this abandoned school. Because we were checking out what seemed to be the main office when suddenly I heard it, a beeping sound. Not loud, but definitely electronic. It almost sounded like when your smoke detector battery is dying, but it was more consistent. So I stopped what I was doing and listened. Hey guys, do you hear that? They all went quiet, and now everyone could hear it. Beep, beep, beep. Now, I knew it was real. The sound was really strange because it echoed off all the empty walls and made it impossible to find out where it was coming from. We tried walking in different directions to see if it got louder or softer, but it seemed to be the same volume no matter where we went. It was almost like the sound was bouncing around the whole building. And this is when our whole vibe started to change. We went from being excited to explore this new place to now being confused and a little bit worried. None of us had a good answer for what this sound could have been. One of my friends thought it could have possibly been a security camera noise. And if you guys remember the abandoned mansion video, trust me, we did not want to run into any security. But that theory went out the window after something else happened. And this is where it got really weird. The beeping went on for around a minute, super consistently. But then it just stopped. Complete silence. We all looked at each other like, okay, that was strange, but maybe it's over now. So we kept exploring. We checked out the gymnasium, which was huge and still had basketball hoops hanging from the ceiling. But then about 5 minutes later, the beeping started again. But this time, it only lasted for a few seconds before stopping. That's when we all started to get genuinely spooked. The pattern made no sense. Why would it start beeping for a minute, then stop, then suddenly start again for 5 seconds? We tried to convince ourselves it maybe was just old building systems. Maybe there was a backup generator that was working somewhere. Or it really could have been a smoke detector. But none of these explanations felt right. The timing was too random. The worst part was not knowing what we were dealing with. If it was just old building systems, then fine. We could ignore it and keep exploring. But if someone else was actually in there with us, we needed to know who and where they were. After the third time the beeping happened, we needed to make a decision. We could either leave and always wonder what that beeping sound was, or we could go to the source and finally figure it out to put our minds at ease. We weren't quite ready to sit on the road trip for another 5 hours, so we decided to go with option 2. Let me just tell you, that was not the right decision, because we decided to split up into pairs to cover more ground. My friends and I went toward one side, while the other two went in the opposite direction. The plan was to text each other if anyone heard the beeping sound get louder on their side. We checked room after room, listening carefully for any electronic sounds. Empty classrooms just stared back at us with their broken desks. Some rooms had old teaching materials scattered over the floor, math worksheets from ages ago, and every time we opened a door, my heart would be racing, thinking that this could be the room where we find the source. Then it happened again. The beeping started up. But this time, it sounded like it was coming from a completely different direction than what we heard previously. So Jake looked at me with this confused expression on his face. I swear it was coming from the other side before, but now it sounds like it's coming from upstairs. That's when we started to wonder if whatever was making the sound was moving around the building. Like someone was carrying whatever device was making this noise. Then, my phone buzzes, and it's a text from the other two saying, "We heard the noise clearer. It sounds like it's coming from upstairs." We finally started to consider the possibility that we weren't alone in this building. What if someone was just walking around with a phone or something? That wouldn't have been good, because if someone was actually doing this, they probably knew that we were there too. We were pretty loud when we walked in, so there's no way they wouldn't have heard us. But also think about it this way. If there's someone in an abandoned building in the middle of nowhere, would you want to run into them? I wouldn't, but there was no cars outside this place or anything, so it just brought more mystery to the situation. We decided to meet back up and search together after we agreed that the sound was coming from upstairs. The four of us regrouped in the main hallway, and then we took the stairs up. Every step felt dangerous. I kept looking behind us to make sure that no one was following, and just as we got to the top of the stairs, the beeping sound started again. But this time, we were sure it was coming from the second floor. Once we got to the top, classrooms lined down the hallways on both sides. All of them had their doors closed. That's when the paranoia really started to kick in. Every single closed door could have had a person hiding behind it. We moved slowly down the hall, all right next to each other, and I know we were all thinking the same thing. If someone dangerous pops out, we're using the other person as a human shield. Or maybe they weren't thinking that, but I sure was. So we'd stop by every room to listen for that beeping noise. My hands were shaking as I reached for the door handles. I just watched the new Final Destination movie, and after seeing all the different ways that you could get hurt, I never would have done any of this if I saw that before. But we got about halfway down the hall when the beeping started again. It was definitely coming from one of the rooms at the end. My friend pointed towards the door that was slightly open with darkness behind it. That one. We all nodded and started walking towards it. Every step felt like we were walking into a trap. Then, we heard it. Footsteps. But not our footsteps. Different sounds coming from inside that room. And they were heavy, almost as if someone was stomping on the ground. We all froze, because now we knew someone was definitely in that room. And someone who probably knew we were coming right after them. Were the noises on purpose to lure us over there? We had no idea. What do you think is scarier? Finding someone where you expect to see them, or not finding anyone at all when you do? I'm about to make an argument for why the second option is way worse. Because when we finally mustered up the okay, I'm gonna stop doing that. When we finally mustered up the courage to go inside that room, we pushed through the door all at the same time, ready to face whatever was waiting for us. But after opening it, the room was empty. Now the questions were starting to multiply. There were definitely footsteps. That could not have been mistaken for anything else. No chance. We all stood there looking around, completely clueless, just waiting for someone to jump out at us. But there was literally nowhere to hide. The room was bare. And after being so worried about the sounds we were hearing, all of a sudden, it was the absence of sound that started to really scare us. The beeping sound had completely stopped. The footsteps that we heard just a few moments ago was nowhere to be seen. It was so quiet you could hear a fly fart. At least when there was beeping, we knew something was happening. Now, we had no idea what was going on. We walked around the entire room, checking every corner. We even checked the ceiling like maybe someone was hiding in the tiles up there. We looked through the windows to see if someone could have possibly jumped out of them, but there was no way. They wouldn't have made it. The confusion was eating at all of us. But then, we thought of a really interesting theory. What if all the noises we had just been hearing were coming from a speaker and not someone at all. Like someone was just using a speaker to play all those noises and prank us, or maybe to warn us to get out. That could have explained the sound of the footsteps too. This was our best guess at the moment, but the reality was much more complex than we ever could have thought, because the panic started to settle in when we realized we might be dealing with something that we can't predict its next move. If there was a person in the building, at least we knew what we were dealing with, but this felt like we were being messed with by something that's invisible. Like we were trapped in some type of game where we didn't even know the rules. And what do you do when you're playing a game that you know you can't win? You quit. So that's what we did. We decided to leave. We were gonna walk back downstairs, out the building, through the fence, and get in the car. No more exploring, no more trying to figure out whatever those noises were. We just wanted to get back on the road and pretend none of this ever happened. So we made it to the staircase and started heading back down towards the first floor. By the way, keep in mind, I was fine with doing this. I didn't care as much as the others to figure out what that noise was. I just wasn't trying to get abducted by any aliens. Unless the aliens are like interested in me, then in that case, hit me up. But as we're going back towards the car, I realized we had a 5-hour road trip coming up and I really needed to use the bathroom. And I didn't think it would be a good idea to pee my pants for the 3rd time that day, so I told my friends I was gonna use the bathroom in the school and I would meet them by the exit. I had no idea that this bathroom visit would change everything we knew about this abandoned school. Because as I'm doing my business in the bathroom, I noticed something on the sink that makes me start to shake. A soda can. But not just any soda can. One that was clearly opened very recently. How did I know? It was still fizzing. I could hear the tiny bubbles popping at the surface. So my brain started to go crazy trying to figure this out. Carbonation doesn't last that long once you open a can, maybe a few hours at most. This meant someone had opened this can today. And more likely, it was in the past few hours. All those electronic beeping sounds, the footsteps we heard upstairs, suddenly it felt like we weren't alone again. Someone else was definitely in this building with us. And they weren't just passing through. No, they were comfortable enough to open a soda can in the bathroom and just chill. That meant they probably knew the building pretty well. But wait, if the soda can was still fizzing, that meant if someone was actually in here, they were probably really close by. And that's when I heard something that made my heart drop. A shuffling sound come from one of the bathroom stalls. It was quiet, but it was definitely there. Like someone shifting their weight, trying to get comfortable while trying to stay hidden. I froze completely. Part of me wanted to run out and never act like any of this happened. But I was also terrified that if I moved, whoever just made that noise would know that I discovered them. The shuffling sound happened again, definitely coming from the last stall at the end. The door was closed, but there was a gap at the bottom so I could see if anyone's feet was under there. And you know I like my feet. Sorry. So I bent down slowly and quietly and I looked. What did I see? Shoes. Beat up sneakers pointed toward the stall door as if someone was using the toilet. I had to make a choice. I could either run away, let this person stay in the bathroom stall and hope they don't come after me, or I could find out who they were and what they really wanted. And obviously, I needed a good YouTube video, so I tried to figure out who they were. No, I'm just kidding. That's not why I did it. I love you guys, but I ain't doing that for y'all. The real reason I wanted to figure out what was beyond that door is because this person clearly already heard us. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm 3 feet away from them. If they wanted to do something to me, I'm already cooked. So I might as well just see what's in there. So I took a breath and knocked on the door softly. Hey, I know you're in there. After a couple seconds, the door slowly opens and this guy peeks out at me. He looked rough, like he hadn't showered in weeks, which isn't that weird because I haven't showered at all this year. But still, his hair was all messy and his clothes were dirty and wrinkled. But the look on his face wasn't scary or threatening. He just looked absolutely terrified. Like he was more afraid of me than I was of him. So we both just stared at each other for a few seconds, not knowing what to say. Then he finally opens his mouth. Please don't call the cops. I'm not causing any trouble, I promise. That's when I realized this guy wasn't some crazy person or a criminal. He was just scared and trying to hide from something. The tension in the room completely changed. Instead of being scared of each other, we started to relax a little bit now. And then he told me his whole story. His name was David. And David had been homeless for about 6 months. And apparently, he had been living in this abandoned school for a while because it was dry and relatively safe. The police had already kicked him out twice before, so when he heard people inside the building, he just assumed it was them again, and he ran. That's why he hid when he heard us exploring earlier. Then came the explanation that solved our biggest mystery, the beeping sound. After asking him about this, it turns out it was his microwave. He had this little portable microwave that he used to heat up food, and it kept beeping every time his Hot Pockets were ready. And if you've ever had a Hot Pocket before, you know that it can be 5 million degrees on the outside, but still ice cold on the inside. So he kept having to heat them up. That's why the beeping sounds would start, and then stop, and then start again. So I brought my friends over to the bathroom, and we explained the whole situation together. And now, I'm using this experience as an excuse to never go inside a school again. the Zodiac Killer, Ted Bundy, the Freeway Killer. What do all three of these infamous serial killers have in common? They all used hitchhiking as a way to find their next victim. So after learning this information, it's probably safe to say that you should never pick up a hitchhiker because chances are it won't end well, right? Apparently that's not what I thought, because a little over a year ago, I was traveling from Joshua Tree, California to Los Angeles because I was at a friend's birthday party. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with that area, it's about a 4 to 5 hour drive, and let me tell you, it is not a scenic one. You see, Joshua Tree is in the middle of the desert, so it's an area with a lot of open land, and hypothetically speaking, it's a great area to hide a body because the odds of someone finding it are very slim. Hypothetically speaking, of course. So anyways, I'm driving back from Joshua Tree and I'm all by myself because all of my friends were staying at that house the whole weekend. But I had to leave a day early because I had a wedding to go to the next day. But it was my friend's birthday and I wanted to spend as much time with him as possible, so I didn't leave the house until about 11 p.m. And since it's a 4-hour drive, I should have been back to Los Angeles around 3 a.m. Now that's super late, obviously. So once I left the house, I didn't expect to see anyone else on the road because you're driving in the middle of nowhere. So it'd be really weird to see anyone that wasn't named Walter White in this area at that time. So I'm driving and my assumption was correct. There was no one on the road. But about an hour into the drive, from probably about 5 miles away, I see a light flashing in the distance. So obviously, I have the same thought that any normal, rational person would have, which is, yep, that's an alien, and I'm 1000% about to get abducted right now. It's over. Okay, that might be far-fetched, but it really wasn't ridiculous to think that because Joshua Tree is not that far from Area 51. You don't think one of those little aliens could have teleported through the wall and escaped? I mean, yeah, they're smart enough to travel to a completely different galaxy, but you think they can't escape Nevada? Okay, enough yapping about alien conspiracy theories. Anyways, as I get closer to this mysterious light, I can see a silhouette of what looks like a human. And then once I'm about half a mile away, and for those of you who aren't American, half a mile is about 300 Queen Elizabeths stacked on top of each other. Hope that helps. But once I'm about half a mile away, I start slowing down because obviously I'm nosy. I want to check out what's going on. Like for anyone that wonders why there's traffic in the world when everyone could just go, it's people like me. I'm the reason why. Because if I see a car crash, I'm slamming my brakes and instigating, looking at it like this. You can't park there. So eventually, I get to a point where I can see that it's clearly a person holding a super strong flashlight. And they saw that I was slowing down, so they start flashing their light towards me as if they were signaling for help. And like I said, I'm nosy, so I roll my window down to see what they're gonna say. But of course, I keep my doors locked, just in case. And the person with the flashlight goes, "Thank you so much for stopping. My car broke down a while ago, but my phone has been dead, so I haven't been able to call my insurance or anyone for help. Can you please help me?" Now listen, I know that I should be smart enough to see that this feels like a trap, but I also have a heart, okay? And if this person was really in trouble and needed help, I was gonna help them. Because also, if you didn't know, the desert gets cold at night. And I mean like freezing cold. So if they had to sit there the whole night without any heat or anything, by the time morning came, let's just say, you would have had to defrost them before putting them in the oven. So I knew I couldn't just leave them there and drive away. My conscience would have felt way too guilty. But I also was still skeptical. So I asked the man how I could help him. And he said if I had a phone, he could use it to call his insurance company. And for a second, I was like, well, what if he's trying to steal my phone? But then after I thought about it, I was like, what is he gonna do? Run off with it? Yeah. Good luck, buddy. We're in the middle of the desert, and I'm pretty sure my car can go faster than you can run. My 2018 Honda Civic is basically a Lamborghini. So I let him borrow my phone, and he thanks me once again. But then he says it's gonna take a minute because he had to look up the number of his insurance company because he didn't know it by heart. So he's using my phone for maybe 3 to 4 minutes without calling anyone. And he kept saying it just wasn't loading because we were in the desert, so the internet was slow. But then finally, he calls someone. And I hear another voice on the other side of the phone. So I trust that this guy is actually talking to someone trying to get help. And after about a minute of talking, he hangs up the phone and gives it back to me. So he says thank you again, and I ask him if he got his problem resolved. But he goes, well, kind of. Since we're so far into the desert and it's so late at night, the insurance company won't be able to get here until morning. Then he says, I know this is asking a lot, but do you think you'd be able to give me a ride to the nearest hotel? And I already know what you guys are gonna say.
Tyler, this is how every single horror movie starts.
And I agree. Trust me, I'm always the one who will watch a horror movie and judge the main character because they'll be like, what's that? Oh, the past 13 people who went into that really creepy house right there mysteriously disappeared? Yeah? Oh, we should go inside it then. Like, I'm not that dumb, I promise. But like I said, I would have felt so guilty if I left that guy out there in the freezing cold for the whole night. And listen, I may be dumb, but I ain't stupid. So I say to the guy, I'm sorry, I'm just not comfortable giving you a ride by myself. How about I call the police and see if one of them could pick you up and take you to a hotel? But the moment I brought up the police, his face looks grim and he goes, no police, please. So now I'm starting to lean to the side of, Oh, okay. You're a Ted Bundy impersonator, aren't you? So now I really don't trust him because of how he responded. But then he goes, sorry, I would just prefer to not have police out here. The plates on my car are updated and I really can't afford a ticket right now. I'm already gonna have to pay to get my car repaired, as you can see. Okay. That was a pretty quick cover story, but I still don't trust him. So then I finally ask what exactly is wrong with his car. And he goes, it's been having engine problems for a while now, and I think it finally just broke down. And I don't know anything about cars, so I couldn't help him with that. But my dad does. He's like the Michael Jordan of fixing cars. So I tell the guy I could call my dad and see if he knows what the problem is and how to fix it. Because the guy had tools in his vehicle, he just didn't know how to use them. Which was also another sketchy thing, like, why do you have tools if you don't know how to use them? Perhaps he had them for a different reason. But the guy says that would be great if I could call my dad, so I do. And guess what? My dad was sleeping. I should have been surprised. So we're back to square one now, trying to think of solutions, and keep in mind, this whole time, he keeps begging me for a ride to the hotel. And I keep turning him down, but then finally, we see another car coming our way in the distance. So the guy waves him down like he did to me, and this car also stops. So I was like, you guys must be as nosy as I am, huh? Like, let's be real, we're all nosy. We want to know what's going on. It's the same reason that if you see a guy getting rejected by a girl in public, your reaction is like, oh my gosh, this is so sad. I can't watch this. I can't bear to watch this. Meanwhile, the whole time in your head, you're thinking, can this please keep going because it's so entertaining? That's just how humans are. I really hope that part was relatable, or else I'm gonna sound like a crazy evil person. But anyways, the person who just came asks what the issue is, and the hitchhiker explains it to him and asks if he could give him a ride to the nearest hotel. But the difference between me and the other car that stopped was this car had 4 people in it. So if this guy was actually the next Ted Bundy, he was gonna have to turn into LeBron in the finals to take all of them on. And they were all bigger guys too, so I don't think they were as sketched out or worried as I was that this guy would harm them. So after explaining his story, the people agreed to give him a ride. And I just drove off and got home about 4 hours later. So that's the end, right? The hitchhiker was just a normal guy who genuinely needed a ride with no ulterior motive, right? I wish, but no, that wasn't the case. Because about a week later, I'm watching the news. And no, I don't normally watch the news, okay? My mom was watching it and I just happened to be in the same room as her, okay? We all know that everyone's mom watches the 9 o'clock news. So anyways, my mom has this playing and I'm not really listening to it because I'm on my phone. But then I hear the news anchor say, coming up next, beware of this hitchhiker scam in Joshua Tree. So my ears perk up like Diddy when he hears the word baby oil. And now I'm locked in. And when the news anchor starts talking about it, sure enough, there was an ongoing scam of a person that would pretend to have a broken down vehicle asking for a ride to the nearest hotel. But for the people who did give him a ride, at some point between picking him up and arriving to the hotel, he would pickpocket them. So he stole wallets, jewelry, anything you could think of. I guess there was like 4 different people that went into the police station and had a similar story about this happening to them. So when I saw that, I knew it had to be the guy that I met. But this made me really curious about one thing. Who was the guy he called using my phone? Because there was a voice responding to him on the other side, so I really thought he was talking to someone. And it just happened a week ago, so I still had the phone number in my recent calls. So I decided to call that phone number back to see who they were. Like now, I was trying to solve the case. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought I was Sherlock Holmes or something. So I looked at my recent calls and found the number, and then I called it myself. But when they picked it up, I could hear slight breathing, but they didn't say anything. So I said, hello, is anyone there? And after about 2 seconds of silence, they just hung up without saying a word. So I tried calling back right away, but when I did that, without ringing once this time, it went straight to voicemail. Why did that happen? They blocked my number. So I don't know if this person was Robin and the hitchhiker was Batman or what, but either way, this is why you never act like the people in the horror movies. If you don't believe in ghosts, I guarantee I can change that after telling you about an experience I had at an abandoned hospital that is said to be haunted. I was skeptical of how true that was at first until I went to the building for myself and saw something that I still can't explain to this day. So this is exactly what happened. Have you ever heard a story so many times that you just had to find out if it was true for yourself? That's how I was with Linda Vista Hospital. If you've never heard of this place before, let me tell you a little bit about it. Linda Vista Hospital is an old abandoned building in Los Angeles that many people believe is haunted. The reason for this is that this hospital had a bad reputation of medical mistreatment over the years, leading to many people passing away inside this building. So since it's closed, there's all sorts of crazy things people say they experienced while being inside here, with one of the creepiest stories being about a baby that people say they can either hear crying or see crawling on the floor. Now I live like 20 minutes away from this abandoned place and I love spooky stuff, so I had to go investigate to see if this was real for myself. Everyone I asked about it mentioned the same stuff. Lights turning on by themselves in a building with no electricity, voices even though they were the only ones in there. At first I thought they were just over dramatizing their experiences to make it sound more spooky, but then one of the people that went there that I talked to said something that really caught my attention. So the person I was talking to was named Noah, and Noah, along with a couple other buddies, went to explore this abandoned hospital last summer. And he's a pretty sarcastic guy. Like, I've never seen him be too serious until I asked him about this hospital. Because with the most straight face ever, he swore to me that he saw a small shadow dart across the hallway while inside there. He said it was definitely shaped like a kid, but it moved so quickly that he couldn't verify anything, and that's all he saw that night. So now I was like, okay, I might actually have to believe what everyone's saying about this place. Noah's story made me even more curious, so I started watching some YouTube videos about Linda Vista Hospital. People exploring the place, setting up ghost hunting equipment, the usual stuff. And I noticed something weird. In everyone's videos, they always said something about a baby. Whether it was them hearing what sounded like crying noises or actually physically seeing something that looked like a baby, that was the common occurrence with all these stories. So that's when I decided, I need to check it out for myself. I figured the only way to know if these people were lying or not for sure was to go to this place myself and see it with my own two eyes. Looking back, that was not the smartest idea. And if I could have made that choice again, I would have never gone. But I can't do that because I was so intrigued to find out the truth. Was this baby real? I didn't know what I believed. So I made a plan to go visit Linda Vista Hospital on a Friday night. I asked my friend Carlos to come with me, and at first, he was all excited about it because he loved watching ghost hunting shows and everything like that. But after I told him the actual name of the hospital, I think he must have looked into it for himself. Carlos texted me an hour before we were supposed to meet saying, "Something came up, can't make it tonight. Sorry." Carlos, if you're watching this, I know you were lying. I guess now is also a good time to say that I wasn't sick when I skipped out on your birthday party. I just didn't want to go because it was at Chuck E. Cheese and I was terrified of that dang mouse when I was 8. Anyways, enough personal talk. Back to the story. Carlos backing out made me want to flunk too, but I was already so mentally prepared for this that I decided I was just going to go alone. So I grabbed my stuff and headed out. Part of me was already regretting this decision, knowing in the back of my mind that something bad was just bound to happen. But the other part of me couldn't escape figuring out the truth to all these stories. The whole drive there, I kept going back and forth in my head. Do I keep going or do I turn back around? I'm not built for this. What am I doing? I should leave. But I really want to find out what's going on there. I need to keep going. Well, what if there's dangerous people inside there and they do something bad to me? All these thoughts raced through my mind, but I decided to just do the stupid thing and thug it out. When I finally arrived, the hospital looked even more creepy than in the pictures I saw online. There were boarded up windows and graffiti everywhere. Glass shattered all over the place. Not where you would typically want to spend your Friday night. I stood there for a minute, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other, just staring up at Linda Vista Hospital. This was the last chance I had to turn back. It was now or never, but I kept walking. I was about to figure out if these legends were true. It was time to go inside. Getting into Linda Vista Hospital was surprisingly easy. There was this broken window on the first floor where the board had been pulled off. You could tell it was where everyone else would enter because there was scuff marks on the wall around it. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like somebody put a heavy blanket all over my body. The air was thick and gross. It smelled like mold. Like, have you ever been inside the house of your friend that doesn't touch grass? That's what it smelled like in there. And no, before you guys say anything, I am not that friend, okay? I promise. I promise. I swept my flashlight around and everything it hit looked super creepy. The light bounced off peeling paint on the ceiling that looked like dead skin. Broken glass covered parts of the floor, and when my flashlight would reflect off of it, I would see these weird shadows, which made me assume this is just the things people would see inside here and assume was a ghost. But like I said, everyone always talked about the baby, so I knew there had to be more to the story. As I started walking through the building, it was impossible to avoid the glass. I tried to walk super quietly, just in case there was anyone else in the building, but I kept accidentally stepping on the glass and it would make a crunching noise every time. It was the only noise inside that hospital, so it was pretty much like I was saying, "Hey ghost, I'm here if any of you want to touch me." Wait, no, that's not what I meant. Don't touch me. I'm here if any of you guys want to haunt me. That's not good either. I don't know what I'm saying. That's pretty much what the glass was signaling to them though. And every time I wasn't stepping on the glass making a loud noise, I would hear these creaking noises coming from above me. But I told myself, it's probably just the wind, or maybe an animal, some rats or something. Which is funny to think now because I wish it was just those things. As I walked further through the building, I would see graffiti all over the place. Some was just your typical tags, writing their names and stuff like that. But some of it was way creepier. There were warnings scratched into the walls and painted in big letters. Some of the phrases were, "Get out," and "She watches," and another one said, "They hear you." I tried to laugh it off, but it just added to the spooky ambiance. As I walked deeper into the hospital, the feeling of being watched got way stronger. Like someone was following right behind me, just staying out of my line of sight. I kept spinning around, expecting to catch someone, but the hallway was always empty. There were so many old rooms in this building that I knew someone could be inside any of these. And just as that paranoia started to kick in, things went south. First thing that happened, my flashlight started flickering. It was brand new with fresh batteries, yet it kept dimming and brightening for some reason. I smacked it against my palm, and that would fix it for a couple minutes before it started to flicker again. After dealing with this problem, the first thing that really started to make me believe all those stories I heard happened. A noise coming from one of the empty rooms. Not a creaking sound or rats scurrying this time. No, because this noise almost sounded like humming. It was soft, but it was definitely there. Way too clear for me to be mistaking it for something else. I first tried rationalizing it by saying, well, maybe it's just a bigger animal than a rat. Maybe it's a raccoon. But last time I checked, outside of Alvin and the Chipmunks, I don't think any animals can sing like that. So I stood there, just trying to really lock in on that noise and explain it to myself. By the time this was going on, I was on the 3rd story of the building. And that's when my flashlight beam caught something on the floor that made my heart drop into my stomach. A line of small footprints in the dust. They weren't mine. They were way too small. They were almost the size of a kid's footprints. And they were heading toward the stairwell to the next floor. Exactly where everyone said the ghost kid hung out. Things started to feel too real now. I stood there at those footprints with my mind racing. This had to be a prank, right? Someone's just messing with me. People knew about the fake conspiracies, so they just put baby marks on the ground to scare people. But the weird thing was, in all the stories I heard about this place, I never once saw anyone mention footprints. So these must have been new, which meant I only had one choice: follow them. Each step I took made me more nervous, but I couldn't stop. Now, any sort of movement or sound startled me. I jumped every time my flashlight reflected off the glass. When I reached the 4th floor, the footprints continued down the hallway. They led exactly to where I was afraid they would, the surgical wing. Right to the place where everyone said they saw the ghost kid. What are the chances, right? I almost turned around right there. But something in my mind was telling me, you're too far deep. You have to figure out the truth now. So I kept going. The surgical wing was way worse than the rest of the hospital. It was like walking onto the set of a horror movie. There were these old operating tables still bolted to the floor. Some of them had crusty stains on them that I really didn't want to think about. And rusty equipment was scattered everywhere. Scissors, metal trays, and these weird clamp things that looked like torture devices. The footprints didn't stop. They kept going down this floor and led into a room at the end of the hall. The door to this room was halfway open, and when entering inside it, I could see that it was used for kids. There were these faded cartoon characters painted on the walls, Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, things like that. But they were all peeling and discolored, which made it look way more creepy. The part that spooked me out the most was not knowing whether these drawings were here from people that just visited the hospital after it was abandoned, or if they were still here from when it was in use. But I pushed the door open a little more and shined my light around. That's when I saw an old wooden rocking chair sitting in the corner. It looked totally out of place among all the metal hospital furniture. Something about that chair just felt wrong. As I stood in the doorway looking at it, the air started to change. It felt like the temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. I started to get goosebumps on me, which was not normal for being in Southern California in June. I decided I saw enough. This was starting to get too weird for me, and I was freaking out. I was about to turn around and leave until something happened that wouldn't let me do that. The rocking chair moved. Not like it fell over or something. No, it started rocking back and forth, super slow at first, then it picked up speed, as if someone was literally sitting in it. But obviously, no one was there. I checked for open windows, thinking maybe a breeze just came in, but they were all boarded up. But it was such a subtle rocking that once again, I couldn't tell if it was actually happening or it was just my brain imagining more stuff. I backed away slowly, not wanting to find out the answer to that question. One step at a time, making sure to not turn my back on that rocking chair. You know that feeling when you're watching a horror movie and you're screaming at the television, telling the character to not go inside that creepy room? I became that character, standing there with footprints right in front of me and a chair totally rocking by itself. Any normal person would have ran away, but I'm pretty sure I have some undiagnosed mental disorders, so I didn't. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was curiosity, but I stood there, and then I did something even dumber. I kept following the footprints. As I followed them to the next floor, I realized this was the creepiest one yet, because a light at the end of this hallway was flickering off and on in one of the rooms, which didn't make a lot of sense because based off everything I saw so far, this place had no electricity. It was nighttime and there weren't any lights on outside of the building, so how was this light flickering? Trying my best to act like I know literally anything about electricity and figuring out how this was possible, the stories I heard online started to become far too real. Because now, The humming sound got louder. I couldn't tell exactly where it was coming from. With so many rooms, it was impossible to pinpoint. But my best guess was that it had something to do with the room that had a light on. I had no other option. I had to go inside it. I crept towards it and peeked my eyes inside, seeing what looked like a recovery room. There were small beds lined up against the walls, maybe 6 or 7 of them, kid-sized with metal frames and thin, dirty mattresses. Some still had sheets on them, stained with age. But from what I could see at the moment, there were no people, so there was still some explaining to do. The light was still flickering inside there, making you think that at any second, a jump scare was about to happen when it flickered on. And just as I was thinking about that, everything I've ever believed about ghosts or the supernatural or whatever you want to call it changed. Because as I went back into the hallway and flashed my light down the long walkway, I saw something. A small figure, maybe 3 feet tall at most. It looked like a child, wearing what appeared to be a hospital gown, the kind that ties in the back and hangs down to your knees. His skin was pale, almost blush in my flashlight beam. Too far away to make out any other details than that, but close enough to tell what it was. For just a second, it couldn't have been any more than that, I saw him. I quickly panned the flashlight another direction because of how terrified I was, and when I shined it back a few seconds after realizing what I thought I just saw, he was gone. I went over towards where I saw him, but by the time I got there, the only thing that was left was a cold spot in the air. My mind has played some pretty weird tricks on me before in these situations, but if this was one of them, that was by far the most messed up. But I don't think it could have been a trick based off what would happen just a few moments later, because I stood there for a minute, trying to process what I had just seen. Now, curiosity turned into paranoia. While I was in there, I was so invested that I never took a step back and was like, oh my gosh, I'm in an abandoned hospital that may be haunted at nighttime. By myself. What am I doing? After actually thinking about this rationally for the very first time and going through what just happened, I decided it was now really time to leave. I thought going back to my car would fix all my problems, but that was far from the case. Because the whole time I was going back towards the first floor, I still could hear the humming. Louder at certain moments, a little more quiet during others, but it was consistent. I crawled right back through the same window I'd used to get in, scraping my hand on a piece of broken glass that gave me a scar I still have today. I don't even know if you guys could see that, but it's right there. Okay, right there. So can you see it? I don't know. Oh, okay, whatever. But I didn't even notice it until after the adrenaline all wore off. I got the door open to my car and jumped inside, locking it immediately, just trying to process everything, including what was real and what wasn't. I didn't want it to end up like a dream where after a while, you can't remember certain details of it. So I sat there for a few minutes just trying to catch my breath and make sense of what just happened. There had to be a logical explanation, right? Maybe someone was playing a prank on me. Plenty of people explored this hospital before. Maybe there was just people that would hum creepy noises and create weird shadows to spook visitors. Or maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me. But no, that couldn't have been the case. Because as I sat there trying to calm down, I figured it was time to go home and relax. So I started my car, but before I left, I looked up at the hospital one more time. And what I saw changed me forever. On the 4th floor, right in that same area where the surgical wing was located, a single light was on in one of the windows. A light that definitely wasn't on when I arrived. The rest of the building was completely dark, except for that one window. I stared at it, unable to look away, and that's when I saw a shadow move across the light. I backed out of that parking lot faster than when the vegans were after me. I didn't care where I was going. I was driving like SpongeBob during his license test. I just needed to get away from whatever was inside Linda Vista Hospital. I still don't know exactly what I saw that night and how much of it was real, but I can tell you, I've never had an experience that felt this vivid.